the hardest days in cycling to control. And like you said, you don't see that on TV. People don't know what's going on. They'll see the start and they'll see the finish, but they didn't see how hard it was in between. And those were truly some of the hardest days imaginable in cycling.
Roubaix. My blood pressure's up watching this race on TV. How stressful is it to go into that, like year after year after year? What, you have like 17 attempts at it?
When I was racing it, I would just go into full like sort of warrior mode. I turned the stress into excitement and motivation. And I knew that without full concentration in a race like Roubaix, there's no chance you can do anything. And it wasn't going to be fun. At any moment was it going to be fun at all.
I'm not sure if you realize the impact you've had on the generations behind you. Like, I wouldn't be doing what I do if it wasn't for you and Lance. Hincapie, welcome to the Roadman Cycling Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
George, how are you?
Good. Thank you. Just got back from our Grand Fundo in Chattanooga, Tennessee. It was a fun event. We had about 1,500 people there. And my 13-year-old son actually won the whole damn thing, which I'm still kind of blown away about. 80 miles, racing against adults, very tough course. And the kid won. I was kind of, I'm still shocked about it.
You're in some pretty good shape as well. Were you towing him clear, or was he sharing a bit of work with you?
Yeah, we actually made the breakaway on the second climb. And then of course I did more work than he did, but nobody seemed to mind. He was 13. And, it's funny, towards the end, I actually posted about it on my Instagram. He came up to me with 10 miles to go. He's like, Dad, I'm cramping really bad. Like, he's never cramped before. And I go, and he's like, what do? I go, you better suck it up and suffer, because that's all you can do at this point.
But you know what, if you don't know what cramp is, or you haven't had it before, it's kind of scary. I had a client and I was talking to him last week, and in my head, this sounded like the craziest shit ever. He was training for the Mallorca 312, and I had him doing a big session like 2 weeks out, his last big session, and he cramped, but he'd never experienced cramp. And he said he was on the side of the road Googling like the symptoms of a cardiac incident.
That's funny. Yeah, same with my son. He was just late. He crossed the finish line, did a really good sprint, came around a guy right at the end, and basically could not walk. He got off the bike and was laid out, legs stretched out. And it was just, as a parent, you don't want to see your kid go through pain like that, but at the same time, it's a rite of passage, so to speak. So I was also kind of happy to see it.
Would you encourage him to pursue a career in cycling if he chose it?
I think I'm kind of I'm beyond that point right now. I'm kind of like, I got to like put the reins on him. He's just all in for cycling right now. And selfishly, it's kind of fun for me because I still like to ride my bike, and now it's not like I have to wait for him or anything. He rides right there with me all the time. And it's kind of like a unique sort of format these days than when we grew up racing, because I could actually race races with him. I can do fundos with him. I can do gravel events with him. And I mean, think about, being able to, me as a dad / coach, talk to him how to like navigate his way through a peloton in gravel races or in Grand Fundos. Like, that's something you could never, ever repeat. You couldn't ever do that in any other sport where I'm actually able to see what he's doing. So it's just a lot of fun for me, and we're having fun with it now. I'm not going to put any pressure on him. He's 13. He wants to do all these intervals. He wants to get a watt meter. I say, no. We're just going to ride fun. We're going to go hard, and learn how to ride your bike. So it's just a fun thing for us right now.
But it's amazing because some things can't be taught in the abstract as well. Like, you can tell somebody, like if it's a 4-man breakaway, you can tell somebody like how to get back onto the wheel after doing your turn. But like in the abstract, sitting down at a coffee shop teaching somebody how to do that, it doesn't make much sense until your heart rate's 190. Exactly.
And as you know, okay, we're always talking about power to weight ratio. We're always talking about, how fast people can go up climbs. But one of the most important things in cycling is how can you handle your bike inside the peloton when people are crashing around you, when you're finding little holes. And I just love being able to experience that with him, because he does have some great awareness in the peloton. And that's something that is almost impossible to teach. That's just an inherent skill. And he definitely has that.
Well, we have an Irish rider over here. I'm not sure if you remember racing against him, Kieran Power. He raced for Navigators and stuff back in the day.
Definitely.
But Kieran's back racing, much like you, because his son is racing. His son, I think, is national champion under 16. And Kieran's in the bunch racing with him. And I often say, how cool is that to be able to race with your dad and have him say to you, like, go here, don't go there. Open your sprint here, don't open your sprint there.
Yeah, it's super fun. We do the Tuesday night, we call them the Tuesday night World Championships, where, all the best riders. And he's won the last 2 weekends in a row. So I'm laughing because we're probably about to be banned from the Tuesday night Worlds, because I'm getting in the breakaway with him and I'm towing him around. So it's kind of funny.
George, let me rewind right the way to the start. Growing up in Queens, I remember growing up in Dublin when I started cycling. I was just, it wasn't cool because I missed the Sean Kelly, Stephen Roach era. And so cycling had taken a dip after that. There were some Irish riders, and no disrespect to them, but they weren't lighting up the world stage, you know, your Paul Kimmages and Martin Earlys. So we hadn't got really this mainstream cycling appeal. So when I started cycling, I remember putting soccer shorts on over my cycling shorts heading out because I was so embarrassed. Then I get out into the countryside and I take them off and I put them in my back jersey pocket. But it must have been strange growing up in New York trying to cycle.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you know, it's been fun to witness the renaissance of cycling here in the U.S. and I'm sure similar there in where you're at in Ireland. But it went from, like you said, it was definitely not a cool thing. There was not a sport in school. Like I was pretty much the only cyclist in my high school, although I got a lot of support from my friends because at that point I was racing internationally and I started getting a bit more attention. So for them, they started thinking it was cool, but it's not like you'd walk into a coffee shop or, a grocery store just to get a snack in your bike kit. Like you would never do that unless you
isn't this wild?
Yeah.
Because now you can go into a coffee shop and sit there and have a full meal and no one looks at you funny.
Exactly. And where it depends on where you are, but it becomes a fashion statement as well. You see people like perfectly kitted up, they're matching their bikes, everything's perfect. It's become sort of a style fashion thing as well. So it's changed a lot, that's for sure.
George, when did you make the move out to Girona?
I moved out to Girona. So I lived in Como, Italy, my first 3 years of my career. So 94, 95, 96. And then 97, I moved out to Girona.
And what was Girona like back then? Who was around? Charlie Wegelius around? Who was around?
Nobody. I mean, Johnny Welts brought us there, and there was a couple of local cyclists, but we were the first pros to go. Myself, Tyler Hamilton, Scott Mercier, Marty Jemison. It was like 4 or 5 of us. And we just had this little thing going. Now it's become like the cycling mecca. I feel like Girona should be, kicking us back a little tax money or something.
Because I went out there first. I was with, I just signed for a French team and Mike Barry was coaching me and I needed a training block. And Mike said, out to Girona. But it was like 2010. So it was just there was iPhones, I think, around, but I don't think I had one because I was so poor. So I had no maps, but Michael literally drew me out, like literally drew me maps. But one of the first routes he gave me was Els Angels, drop down Els Angels into the valley over Santa Paella. And he said, this is the Hincapie loop. And I was like, what? How did that come about? Because now this is actually this is a big thing now. People say, oh, I'm doing the Hincapie loop.
Yeah. It's funny. I actually have no idea how that came about. Of course I did that loop a bunch, but somehow they started calling it, and I have nothing to do with it. In fact, people that do it, some of them don't even know who I am. They just call it, they just call it, I think that's what I heard. They call it the Hincapie loop, but I have no idea how that came to be.
So I'd heard this story. Obviously, there's no truth in it, but it's a good little folk story. I'll give it to you. I heard that your wife was, or maybe girlfriend at the time, was pregnant, and she said to you, okay, George, you can go training, but you can't go any more than 2 hours from the house. So you ended up just doing loops of this Santa Paella Els Angels lap.
Nope, that's not true, but it's a good story.
It's a good story. You can have that one. Yeah, I feel like you should be charging royalties for that loop. So you and Lance have obviously been through thick and thin together, 7 tours, and now a podcast which is just dominating the cycling space. If anyone hasn't checked it out, the move. But can you remember your first time meeting him? Did the two of you gel and have this bromance straight off the bat?
Yeah, we met at the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs, and he was probably 17, I was 15, and we definitely gelled right away. He didn't gel with hardly anybody else, but for some reason him and I got along. We hung out a bunch, and it's been kind of, as you know, a long story since then.
And was it the training hours you guys were doing? What was given? It seems like SRMs were coming on the scene as well around then. And I've had Tyler Hamilton on the podcast as well. And he was talking about just the different types of intervals, like 40-20s and stuff that you guys started doing and how hard you guys were training. Did you have an awareness at the time of how much, obviously it's dialed to the nth degree now around diet and training techniques, but I feel like that was a deflection point in cycling history when I look back at all the generations where you guys started looking for edges with diet, looking for edges with equipment. Was that bike you were riding with Postal? Was that one of the first carbon bikes, that OCLV 110?
Yeah, I think so. It was one of the first carbon bikes, that's for sure. And we are always very focused on equipment choices, wheel choices, and that obviously progressed and evolved throughout my career. And now it's like it's crazy. Like you said, the training that they do now, the way they measure their data, everything is calculated to every minute detail, where they exactly, even to the point where they know exactly how much carbohydrates they spent in that particular day and how much they need to replace it. I mean, it's a lot more evolved and advanced than when we were racing.
Did you buy into the power meter straight away? Because you were sort of sitting in a place, every pro that comes along now, it's, they're only born into this generation of power meters. But you were at a transition point where there was definitely guys in the peloton racing without it. And then it came along. Was it something you adopted straight away?
Yeah, I mean, I adopted it as soon as it was available to me. I adopted it for training, and then of course we started using it in racing later on. But it was definitely a tool that once I got my hand on it, I tried to make the most of it.
So 1999 comes along and you guys win the Tour de France, and you went from being, the bad news bears, this honky, shitty camper van that rock up to races and very much the underdogs, to leading and winning the biggest bike race in the world. Talk me through that feeling, because it's the bit that, and I've heard you and other riders speaking about it before, and you as a road captain, we see a highlights package, and back then it was the Phil Liggett highlights package that we'd get on Channel 4 over here. But you don't see a lot of the work that gets done in the valleys, like where you as road captain is deciding, okay, who's going in this break? How much rope are we giving them? That's a fascinating tactical battle. How stressful was that in that first tour? Because you hadn't got the system we came to see is just so dialed through the years. This was
Yeah.
very much in its formative stages here.
Oh man, I still have PTSD from that, because we were just getting this shit kicked out of us like nonstop. And you know, I still wake up with nightmares about racing through the Massif Central, where you have these huge rollers. You climb up 1 kilometer, down 2 kilometers, and as you know, if you're at the front and you're pulling downhill, these guys in the peloton aren't even pedaling. So as soon as they hit the bottom of this climb, they're gone. So it was like those are some of the hardest days in cycling to control. And like you said, you don't see that on TV. People don't know what's going on. They'll see the start and they'll see the finish, but they didn't see how hard it was in between. And those were truly some of the hardest days imaginable in cycling, was controlling those breakaways from happening. We were a bunch of kids. We didn't even know what we were doing, but we knew that we had to stay together, and we knew that we couldn't let these big breakaways go. And that was basically a very simple strategy. It was like, stay together no matter what. And we're going to be stronger together than one guy jumping away with these breakaways. And let's just keep this breakaways as close as possible.
And because I know I've been on teams where we've had yellow jersey and four stage race, and on the last day, like the stress levels are just absolutely through the roof. Where you're like, okay, you can let him go, you can let him go, you can let him go. Shit, don't let him go, don't let him go, don't let him go. And it's
Yeah.
like up everyone after him. Did this system get more refined as you went through the years, or did you slide into that road captain role?
Yeah, I kind of slid into it just because of being there so much with Lance, and being in that position where you start the stage and you kind of know you got to, there's 200 guys in the bunch, but you got 10 or 15, maybe 20 guys where you probably can't let them get away or get much time. So it's just about always being ultra aware of who's going before they're actually gone and get 5-10 seconds up the road. And that happened many times. And then you learn a lesson quickly, because then you have to go full gas for 10, 20, 30K as hard as you can go to get these guys back. And you burnt a lot of matches. So you learn the lesson quickly. Like, it's much better to just get these guys right away before it becomes a panic situation and you're burning all your matches trying to get them, for an hour or two.
And in those 7 years where you guys were just so dominant on it, how much of a role did you have in rider selection? So you were clearly the voice on the road for, controlling this dominance that you had over 7 years. But how much of you saying to Johan, these are the guys I need around me to do my job in those key stages around Massif Central and stuff. Obviously, Lance had his, climbing lieutenants who, he needed later on. But did you have a role in that selection for the guys you needed around you?
Nope, zero. I knew that, Johan was a great, selector of guys. And it was always from the beginning of the year, you never were guaranteed. Even I was never guaranteed a spot, even though I probably was, but like they would never let me know that. but we knew that we'd have 3 or 4 guys like myself that were going to be, our job was to keep Lance out of trouble, keep him safe, the position guys, keep him up in the front. And then the workhorses, once we needed to chase down some breakaways or control some time gaps from the breakaways, that was going to be us. And, that was definitely a Johan and Lance thing. I feel like the sport has changed so much that, yeah, of course we trained really hard back in the day. But these guys are never home. I mean, they go from race to altitude camp to race. I think one of the top guys, I won't mention his name, but from the Tour of Romandy to the Tour de France, he's going to be home 4 or 5 days. That's it.
Brutal.
It's brutal. You're either at an altitude camp or you're racing. And I mean, that's hard. I loved my role as a cyclist, and I never took it for granted being a professional cyclist. I always worked as hard as I could, but I feel like I had a little bit of balance where I can come home a bit more than normal guys. And I was able to come back to the US and spend time at home, before the Tour de France. And I feel like that made my career a bit more manageable. I don't know if I can handle it now where these guys are gone all the time.
But like, that's testament to, what did you, 17 Tour de France's? Like, you need the balance to last that long. And that would be my worry. Like, I was on guest on Cyclists magazine podcast last month, and they were talking to me about Sagan, and they were saying basically Sagan, the flop who's won the world's 3 times. And I was like, if you look at Sagan through a lens of purely pro cycling, you go, yeah, he's gone off the boil. But how much of that is deliberate? How much of it's him saying, you know what, there's other things in my life, and I don't want to be, like you're saying, 5 days at home in a 4-month period. I'm happy to pick up a big paycheck. I'm happy with the level I'm at. I have some cool legacy already, but there's more to life. I don't know what he's into: spirituality, personal relationships, other side hustles he has.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I don't know him personally, but he definitely was part of, my generation as I was ending my career, where there was a lot more balance involved. You were able to come home a lot more than now. So yeah, perhaps we're seeing that where, he may not want nothing to do with all these altitude camps and really just not having a life, so to speak.
Roubaix. We can't talk to Mr. Hincapie without talking about Roubaix. It looks fucking stressful on TV to watch. My blood pressure's up watching this race on TV. Like, the speed you're hitting sections like Arenberg Forest and like the crash that Mitch Docker had a few years and stuff on it. It's stressful to watch. How stressful is it to go into that, like, year after year after year? What, you have like 17 attempts at it?
Yeah.
Every single time you're going in thinking, at a point, you're thinking to yourself, top 10's not even a result here. It's podium or nothing, I'd say.
Yeah, no, for sure. And yeah, I'm actually in the same boat you are. When I watch it now, it stresses me out. I get the sweaty palms. I'm like, this is crazy, because I remember it so well. But when you're racing it, when I was racing it, I would just go into full, like, sort of warrior mode where I made the stress, I turned the stress into excitement and motivation. And I knew that without full concentration in a race like Roubaix, there's no chance you're going to do anything. And it wasn't going to be fun at any moment. Was it going to be fun at all? But it was going to be, if you didn't plan out the sections properly and you didn't envision how you were going to position yourself in your head, for instance, going into the Arenberg, that's just the only thing. That's the things that got me through it, was just being able to envision beforehand when I was going to move up, how I was going to save energy while moving up and still entering the Arenberg first in the first 5 guys, which, by the way, in all those 17 years, I pretty much always entered the Arenberg first and at least top 10. And, that's a kind of a small victory in itself, because it's one of the most stressful sectors in all of cycling to arrive in the front. And, I just kind of, I found a lot of not joy. I found a lot of motivation by being able to always be one of the favorites in that race, and never took it for granted.
And you were so close so many times in Roubaix, and then Boonen was a teammate of yours at Postal. Was he the first season at Postal? Like, yes. Can you, what's the difference? Obviously he's a fast finisher, but there's a lot of fast finishers. What's the difference with someone in Roubaix that goes from, they can get a bunch of top 10s to someone as prolific, maybe the greatest Roubaix rider ever?
Well, he was just a killer. I mean, as soon as he came on the scene, he had no fear. He had a ton of power. His first training camp, I mean, he was almost riding guys off of his wheels in the sprints. Young kid. And, that particular Roubaix, he just kind of got a free card to get in the breakaway. And when you're in a breakaway in a rainy Roubaix and not having to do that much work, he kind of had a sort of a free ride and throw that sort of power on that he had, the confidence he had. And he ended up getting, I think, third place that year, but it was certainly a breakout ride for him. But we knew from the day one that this kid was a killer, and he was going to do a lot of things in the sport of cycling.
Because I can't remember the year you came to the line, but I think it was you were coming to the line with Fletcher and Boonen, and you were second, if I remember. But right. like how hard a group was that to sprint out of? You must have been thinking coming in the road, like, oh, this isn't going to go well.
Yeah, no, it's funny. I got a little bit criticized afterwards that, they're like, why didn't you attack? You guys were away for the last 15K. It's like, what are we going to do? You're 250 kilometers into, the hardest race on the calendar. You're going 40K an hour. What am I going to do? Go 42K an hour for 600 meters and like a TV attack? You're not going anywhere. Like, you have to go all in for the sprint. And the chances were very low that I was going to beat Boonen. That was just there, but you still got to try.
George, I've chatted to a lot of lads on the podcast who are transitioning out of cycling into life after cycling. I've had Swain Tufts recently on the podcast, and super guys. But when I chat to a lot of guys, it seems like they need to take a little bit of time to see what the next step is post cycling. You have the benefit of being a few years down the retirement road now, and it seems like you've just built this, empire, for want of a better word. Like, the podcast is thriving. Your Hotel Domestique, which I've never been to, but looks phenomenal. Looks like it's doing brilliant. You have the Grand Fondos, you have the Hincapie brand. Did you have thought in this before you retired that, okay, this is what I'm going to start building? Or how did this, movement come about?
So it was just kind of, I'm fortunate that my brother and I are partners in everything we do. And he started the clothing brand while I was racing. And back then my whole, sort of role in that brand was just to bring attention to the brand and what we're doing. So I was lucky in the sense that as soon as I retired, I jumped into, working for the clothing brand. We opened up this hotel, which almost destroyed me a few years later. We started doing
financially or mentally or both.
Both. But you know what? It's all these things like in cycling, when you crash and you get sick, you can't give up, right? You gotta heal up and get better. So I feel like, I was fortunate in the sense that, the hotel was super tough on me emotionally and financially, and didn't think I was going to make it, but finally made it through. And now it's in the best place it's ever been. So I got a lot of these sort of life business lessons that were thrown at me after I retired from cycling. That one, I never got bored, never missed being in the pro peloton for a second, just because I was so busy doing other stuff. And I definitely, I'm grateful that I was put in those positions and I have these things to focus on, because, I think if I didn't have them after only riding my bike for so long at that level, and then not being able to have something to jump into and focus on, it would have been very, very tough mentally to transition. So I was lucky in the sense that I had these things that I could focus on.
Do you still set yourself targets? And this is one of the things I was chatting to some of the, Sven and a bunch of other guys about. I feel like when you're a pro cyclist, everything's mapped out. Like, we have training targets that we're trying to hit for, watts per kilogram. We have our weight targets. And then we have our whole calendars planned out where we know what our objectives are, and they're graded. This is our A objectives. These are supporting objectives. And then the pro cycling rug is pulled from under you and you step away from the sport. And you've gone from a life of very focused goal setting to a little bit of drifting through life and not setting these goals. Do you still goal set?
You know what? That's a great question. And even though, like you mentioned, I have a lot of stuff going on, and I still haven't figured it out by any means. I'm still learning. And goal setting is one thing that I'm definitely not as good at as when I was a pro cyclist. But it's a skill that I feel like we can always work on and try to become better at it. But yeah, certainly I focus on the event. Like, for instance, we had our event in Chattanooga. Of course, my focus was all about that. Making sure that the event was as successful as possible. We have one coming up next month in Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania. So these are things that, my goals are that they are successful, thought out events that people appreciate being part of. So yeah, these things stimulate me, but they're not the set hard goals. Like, I want to finish top 3 in Paris-Roubaix. I want to, win a stage of the Tour de France. These are things that I'm still learning as well, 10 years later down the road of retirement.
not to celebrate your stumbling points, but it is super motivating for myself and other listeners because, we've this iceberg theory where you only ever see the tip of the iceberg. You see Rory McIlroy driving the ball 350 down the center of the fairway. You don't see the days he was in the driving range, shanking drives until his hands bled and going home crying and wondering what he's going to do with his life. I feel like that way as well. When I look at the move, I look at the Hincapie brand, the hotel, and I'm like, shit, George has this so well figured out. And I'm trying to build my brand, which is, many multiple smaller than you. And I'm kind of trying to find that trail that you've plotted through business. And it's motivating to know that as I'm stumbling, you've also stumbled on that path as well. And I'm sure there's people looking at my podcast and going, holy shit, he's so big. And they're on episode 4 thinking, oh, I need to quit. But it's great to know somebody else is having the same very human struggles.
Absolutely. I mean, it's constant, and I embrace it. I feel like I know that, it's not, things aren't going to always be perfect. I embrace the challenges, even though sometimes they're really tough. Sometimes you think you're not going to get through, but what's the best thing to do when you really feel like you're down in the dumps and you're not going to get through? Go for a bike ride. We always got the bike, right? Where you can clear your mind, get out to do that. I still love doing that. I still have my health. I still really, pay a lot of attention to my health. Even probably more, I'm probably much more balanced athlete now than when I was a professional cyclist. As you know, you can't do anything when you're a professional cyclist. Going for a 20-minute walk, you get sore. So I love the fact that I'm able to still stay healthy, work out all the time. And, that's a big outlet for me as well.
George, I know a big focus shift for me, and just to finish up on this one, a big focus shift for me was I was trying to coach basically young kids to be, the next George Hincapie, to see if I could get a 17-year-old, put him on a team in France and progress. And I had a moment where a buddy of mine asked me to coach him, and I was like, no way. He was like a 45-year-old alcoholic and basically every bad habit you can have, from smoking to drugs. And I was like, nah, it's not happening. And then he eventually convinced me to coach him. And I seen over the next 6 months, like the huge weight loss, huge power improvements, but it was the stuff you couldn't measure, like the relationship improvement with his wife, his happiness levels, his energy levels, just how motivated and stuff he felt. And that's really my calling now, is to spread the cycling message far and wide. But you have spread this cycling message further and wider than basically anyone I know out there. And I'm not sure if you realize the impact you've had on the generations behind you. Like, I wouldn't be doing what I do if it wasn't for you and Lance. And I'm sure many of the listeners of the podcast wouldn't be tuning into this podcast if it wasn't for the path that you and Lance bet through those forests of Europe to bring cycling to mainstream consciousness. So I suppose from me and the listeners, thanks for what you do.
I appreciate it. That's really nice of you to say that. And like I said, I love my position that I've had in the sport. I still love riding my bike on a daily basis. And, those things, that story you just mentioned about that 45-year-old, I feel like those are some of the most impactful things we can do now. Is, we can help, the aspiring professional athlete, but when you see cycling change an average person's life, which we all know that it can, those are the most impactful stories for me.